We've had one dry free practice session and one that was wetter than a mermaid's flannel. And now the sun is shining and there are spots of rain falling once again. The teams do not know whether they are coming or going or whether they have been. And this is when the pressure is going to count. It's qualifying for the Fanatec GT2 European Series. Welcome to Spa-Francorchamps. Welcome to just about every possible weather condition all thrown into one day. And welcome to 20 minutes, the green flag which has been waved for Q1. This will determine the grid for the first of the two 50-minute races that come with mandatory pit stops and in most cases driver changes. And as I say, the road is still damp in places, it's dry in places, it might be getting drier, it might be getting wetter. It's a real lottery, this session. David Addison and Andy McEwen trackside. It's a fabulous track, Andy, but the weather is certainly making people work for their money today. Yeah, like you say, David, we've had one wet session and one dry one, and now sort of a bit of both, really. The track was almost there, wasn't it? Over the last sort of half an hour, it went through quite a significant drying process. And then, yeah, there were just one or two spots that started to fall, although I think, touch wood, it may have just abated for the time being. So I'm sure the drivers will be happy with that because, of course, one of the real sort of attractions of this Fanatec GT2 European Series is that it really does cater for those bronze-graded drivers, the AM drivers, as we refer to them as. And much as I'm sure some of them do enjoy the challenge of driving in the rain, a dry track is probably a tad more inviting. Well, it's certainly a lot better on this section, the Kemmel Straight, than it was for FP2, which I think I'm right in saying really was the worst of the day weather-wise for the second free practice session. It wasn't much better going into British GT, but it really was at its foulest. Whereas now, look at this, it's sunglasses weather. But not all the way around, because as I say, there are spots of rain falling. Now, it is one driver, one session, so in most cases, you've got the slower of the two drivers, many of whom are new to the championship, although it's a modest entry still. We're getting new drivers in each time around. You're looking at Christoph Ulrich, who has done the absolute best within the first sector, and Christoph Ulrich with the AM class KTM. There's an AM and a Pro-Am segment to this. And Christoph Ulrich has been very much the man to beat within the AM class, but it's getting tougher every time out. Now, the entry, sadly, has lost at least one car. We've lost a KTM that was withdrawn earlier on in the day after a big accident with Rupert Atzberger and Hendrik Still's car. And normally, I'd be saying at this point, right, have a look at number 33, Mark Patterson, because that should be good for the front row of the grid. Well, if the car races, it will be from the back, because strangely, it was Anders Fjordbach, who's normally metronomically good, but he crashed it pretty heavily at Radion this morning. Which, of course, has some significance in the Pro-Am Championship fight, because there was a chance, wasn't there, that that team could have actually wrapped up the title here this weekend, because this is the penultimate event of the season. We've got two races here, two races later in the year at Paul Ricard, and they arrived here some 26 points up in the championship. So a big opportunity now for their nearest rivals, Peter Gulinks and Bert Langevin in the PK Car Sport car. If they have a good weekend, then it's game right back on for the Pro-Am title, isn't it? Absolutely right, yes. So they need to be on that grid, and equally, Fjordbach and Patterson, because they're racers, they want to be here, they want to be on track. So what does this grid turn out to be? Well, it's Christoph Ulrich who will do both sessions because he's a soloist, taking on Peter Gulinks, who's had a couple of race wins this year. Also in this, you've got Michael Bleekemolen in number 23 KTM. Yes, that Michael Bleekemolen, 71 years of age, still going strong, one-time Grand Prix racer, inveterate enthusiast, and having his debut in the championship. There is also in this session one Stéphane Rattel, who kind of knows a bit about GT racing, and he's a pretty handy driver himself, and Le Patron will be another driver there or thereabouts, I'm sure. But you look at these pictures and you think, well, it can't be the same day that the cars were out earlier, because the track, it's almost bone dry, certainly on this section, but in a lot of places as well. Not everywhere, but the majority of the lap is now looking good. And so at the end of this lap, we're going to get proper representative lap times, aren't we? Yes, we are indeed, and the number 7 car then, Ulrich, purple in the first sector, unsurprisingly, as he starts to get these tyres into the proper operating window. Slick tyres, most definitely the way to go at the moment. But you're right, though, this is the joy of Spa, isn't it? I know that it's a bit of a cliche to say that if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes and it'll change, but it really does. We were looking at a weather radar, actually, just before this session, and there was a huge band of rain on its way. It was due to arrive now, 4 o'clock local time.
and just like that it disappeared, and the sun came out, and we've got quite a nice afternoon ahead of us. So yes, the track should be quite quick. It'll be a bit green, of course, after all of the rubber's been washed away, and that can sometimes, if you can harness that right, lead to even quicker lap times.
Absolutely so. Well, Christoph Ulrich is looking very good because he's done an absolute best within the first sector. He's not being troubled by traffic, whereas 1 or 2 have got a few cars around them. Further back in the lap, just going up through Les Combes at the moment, for example, you've got Michael Blickermolen, Stefan Rattel, and also Hubert Trunkenpolz all running in a gaggle. But Christoph Ulrich comes way out wide over the curb, but just the right side of that white line with one set of wheels, up now towards Blanchimont, and this will be an even quicker lap time. Now in FP1 in the drive, we were getting them into the low 2:24s, and I think we can probably get there again, can't we now, in qualifying trim?
I would suspect so. I mean, the opening gambit was a 27, and that was not an out lap, but a sort of exploratory lap. So, yes, I think you may be right. Here's the 81 Audi then, second place in the Pro-Am Championship. They've had 2 wins so far this year. They've been regulars on the podium, and this really is such a crucial weekend for them now to try and strike back in the championship. In the sectors, though, this isn't looking spectacular, is it? I suspect that Gulix has possibly backed off to try and get away from some of that traffic that you mentioned he was in. This Audi doesn't half look good, though. This is my first time seeing these GT2 cars in person, and they are actually mighty impressive. They look good, they sound good, they look like they're really good fun to drive, and quite forgiving as well, which is good for the AM drivers, so they really can push hard and get the maximum performance out of them. Second place then for Gulix, not a bad opening effort, and the quickest of the Pro-Am so far.
Yeah, from the front you think, yes, it's an Audi R8, but it's very, very different from the midsection and back, and you're right, the aero is such that it has an effect, but it's not totally aero dependent. It's not like a GT3 car. So the AM finds it a user-friendly car and enjoys driving it because it rewards the effort that is put in. Christoph Ulrich remains the fastest, and Peter Gellings didn't back off so much, but it was more of a start-up lap, but he's less experienced a driver anyway than is Christoph Ulrich, who's raced in things like the GT Sports Club, whereas Gellings is a relative newcomer. Up to third now has gone the KTM in the hands of Chris Rosenberger, the car that he shares with Hans Stuck. This is newcomer to the series, Leonardo Gorini, returning after a few seasons away, former Lamborghini Super Trofeo racer, but in the LP Racing Porsche, in the works colours of the early 1980s, going back to 956s and then 962s. And Leonardo Gorini, who was looking good in the wet, actually, has now done the absolute best within the first sector, which takes you up the Kemmel Straight. Now, quite often, if you're running in traffic, that's a bit of a false game because you might get a tow, and therefore it's not hugely representative of your pace, but he's on his own. So this is absolutely down to Gorini's pace, and he's an AM, but looking very strong indeed. And it's good to have another Porsche on the grid to go with the Martini pseudo-coloured car of Aurelius Rustica, the one that he shares with Michael Vergers, and it is Rustica at the wheel, and at the moment he is the slowest of the 10 that we've got on track, as still high-class racing tries to rebuild the Audi. But Gorini at the moment looking good, an absolute best and a personal best.
Yes, and that absolute best in Sector 1 is impressive because straight line speed hasn't always been the Porsche's forte, has it? And so to be able to set that sort of time up through Radial, down up the Kemmel Straight, even as you continue to climb up there, that is pretty impressive. The middle sector is not quite as good, but it is still a PB. And let's see where this puts him then. Gorini is 5th at the moment, the 4th highest placed AM car, and that really is the battle here. Although all of the drivers in this particular session are the bronze-graded AM drivers, those that are in the all-AM teams are really just watching for where they stack up against their class rivals. You score points within your class rather than overall. Gorini goes second, 2.5 seconds slower than Ulrich still, but that is a bit more like it, a 2:28.911 suitably for the 911 car. And
straight away gets warned about track limits coming out of the chicane. So you've now got 1 and 2 being both AMs, and the quickest of the Pro-Am cars, albeit with the AM driver. Peter Gellings is 3rd, Chris Rosenberger is 4th, Jaromir Jarek is 5th fastest, sharing with Mara Casadei in the Lamborghini, Michael Blickermolen. So you've got a Formula 1 driver as an AM, 6th, Michael Blickermolen. Sedi Simoni with the KTM is 7th fastest. They're just going out of the shot. Aurelius Rustica is 8th, 9th Hubert Trunkenpolz, and that last lap for Gorini has just been binned because of track limits. So he was warned about them, and he's had that lap time taken away. So this one is the one that's going to count, and he's already 3/10 up within the first sector. So Leonardo Gorini, if he can stay the right side of the white lines, should be good again here.
Yes, but it's so tempting, isn't it? Just run that bit wide out of La Source, out of the bus stop, out of a campus even, and Corporal Frere, where you can just run wide, Blanchimont too. It is part of the trouble of these tarmac runoff areas, I suppose, but yes, at least it is fairly consistently policed at the moment. The good news for Guarini is that he's going quicker again now. 41.0 in the first sector is quite a bit quicker than anyone else is managing right now, and so his chances of moving up from 6th place look reasonably high. We've also had a personal best in the first sector for Ulrich, the current fastest driver in the session, and also for... that might have exceeded track limits there, David.
Yes, I don't think that was deliberate. That was an error, certainly. It shows how hard he's pushing and all of that. But yes, Leonardo Guarini way out wide there. It didn't actually lose that much. I mean, yes, it made a longer lap. He didn't particularly slow, did he? But he was off the racetrack, certainly.
Yes, so well, we'll get a look at what his middle sector time is. The middle sector really is where you make or break your lap, isn't it? Because it's so much longer than the rest of the lap. First sector in the 40 seconds.
I hate to talk myself out of a job here, but number 88 has just had a lap time cancelled for track limits. That is being driven by one Stefan Rattel.
Surely not.
Very brave of Peter Daly, the race director, to put his head on the block like this, but the governor has exceeded track limits. Right, Leonardo Guarini, absolute best sector 1. It's still a personal best in sector 2, so let's see what he can do then. He's been pushed back down to 6th as a consequence of losing his earlier best lap time. Keeping the right side of the curb, just about. So Leonardo Guarini up towards the timing line. This should put him back onto the front row of the grid, should it not? He breaks the bead to go 2nd. He's still 2 seconds down on the charging Ulrich, but the Porsche is back to the front row of the grid.
Will he keep it though? Because he had that big wide moment coming out of Pouhon, didn't he? So, and that was actually quicker than his previous effort as well. Yeah. So he didn't lose time; he gained it. Here then is the number 24 car. This is Rosenberger, the Reiter Engineering KTM Crossbow. These things really do look good, and I love walking past them in the garage. Just when they're sat there with their roofs up. Essentially, they don't have doors. They lift the roof hatch up, and the driver climbs out the top. It's sideways there, but a good example actually of the drivability of these cars. The car got sideways, but it didn't snap. It was quite a lazy little power slide. The drivers can steer into it, ease off the throttle, and all is good. They can carry on their way. Meanwhile, David, I'm afraid our predictions about that lap time for the 911 have come true.
Except it's turn 19 again. It's not Pouhon. It's down at the exit of the bus stop. Here is Stefan Rattel, who's another offender, dare one say, and he needs to improve. That was okay. So although the sectors are down, hopefully it'll be a half-decent lap time. He comes through, yes, goes up to 8th fastest now at 2:34.449. So Guarini has done yet another absolute best within the first sector. The Porsche is a bit happier on straights than it is round corners because it has always tended to have a bit of inbuilt understeer seemingly, and therefore it's harder to drive. Certainly around Misano they were struggling with the Rustica Vergas car. Here, where you've got decent straights, it's a bit better balanced. So Guarini underlining the pace of that car and is for the moment 6th, but being warned about the track limits again.
Christoph Ulrich is going quicker again in the first sector. So is Guarini, as you said. Worth mentioning as well that Christoph Ulrich, there is maybe a slightly stronger chance that he will wrap up the AM Championship this weekend. He's some 39 points clear of Chris Rosenberger and Hans-Joachim Stuck. So with 50 points available per weekend, 25 points for a win in each of the 2 races, there is a decent chance that Ulrich, especially given the fact he's some 3.2 seconds quicker than anyone else at the moment, could be provisionally at least crowned champion come the end of the day. Rattel down into Bruxelles there. That is such a tricky corner, isn't it? That downhill braking zone, downhill all through the corner. Every single car that goes through there suffers from a bit of understeer. Now he hops and bounces over the curve. What are his sector times like? Not a personal best in the first sector though, so I guess maybe with this now dry track, slightly higher ambient and track temperature, tyre management could be a bit of a factor here. They've not been diving into the pit lane for a fresh set of boots, have they? So have some of them maybe had the best of their tyres? Possibly.
We've also got Hubert Trunkenpolz being warned about track limits. Also, the lap time that he's on has been cancelled, and we just had a note as well saying that Guarini's current lap time has been cancelled. Well, he had gone 2nd fastest, but yet again, I fear that one might not stay. This is Michael Lekemolen in the KTM that he shares with Peter Cox. Now, Michael doesn't do a lot of racing anymore, but hugely experienced he is. For many, many years after Formula 1 and Formula 2, it was largely the European Renault categories that he raced in. 5 turbos, the Alpines, 21 turbos, the Spiders, you name it, he's done them all. And now coming into GT2 cars. And where is he in the times? 5th. He got pushed back one last lap around by Gellings and Guarini, but heads over the timing line. And Michael Blekemolen's lap is a 2:31.212, so it's an improvement in terms of time, but it keeps him 5th on the grid.
Yes, we did have an improvement as well from Gellings on the previous lap, so he is now fractionally quicker than he went earlier on. In fact, yes, a second place, 2.5 seconds off pole. That was about 3.1, 3.2 last time I checked. So they're closing in slightly on Ulrich, but I think that Christoph is probably feeling pretty comfortable in his position atop this qualifying session. Gaelic second, then Rosenberger third, Blakemole in fourth, and Jurek in fifth. Guarini is a bit of a strange one here, isn't he? He's clearly got the pace to go onto the front row, but he keeps getting these lap times disallowed. And his first, and so far I think only legal lap that he set, was not a terribly quick one. And now he's not improving in the sectors, so he's probably also used the best of his tyres, but didn't get anything out of it, did he?
Because each lap has been taken away from him for track limits at turn 19, seemingly. Now, Peter Gellings is still pressing on, and he has done a personal best in Sector 1, although Christoph Ulrich has just done an absolute best in Sector 2. Having said that, he was slower than he had been previously in the first sector. So one or two of them are still able to wring a time out of it, and Michael Blakemole is another, and Aurelius Rustica is another, because he has got 2 personal bests now in number 5 Porsche. So Peter Gellings comes through. Ulrich goes over the line, does a 2:26.418, so he was fractionally down on what he'd done earlier on. But Gellings is looking good, stringing together 2 personal bests here as he comes down towards the bus stop. He will get one more lap out of the session, as over the line ahead of him has just gone Guarini up to 4th fastest. Let's hope he keeps that one, because it moves him a row up the grid. Now, what about Gellings? Can he narrow 2.5 seconds to Ulrich? He should be able to, and he goes through, yes, brings the gap down to 1.9. But still, that's an indecently quick KTM, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Nearly 2 seconds still the advantage, but as you said, Gellings there going quite a bit quicker than he had done previously. The Lamborghini here then of Jurek, 6th place at the moment for the number 32 car, heads into the bus stop, or the chicane as we've discovered they now call it, not officially referred to as the bus stop anymore, which is a bit of a shame. Middle sector is where he's losing most of the time, it seems. He was only 1.2 seconds off in the first sector, only loses another 1.8 in sector 3, but that middle sector, which is over a minute long for these GT2 cars, is just worth so much time. And part of the appeal of Spa, I guess, is the flowing nature of it, but it means that if you do make a mistake somewhere, you can still be feeling the pain 2 or 3 corners later. And yes, looks as though with time for one more improvement, Jurek has a little bit of work to do. He's only 6/10 though behind Blakemole, and so 5th could be on.
But he's another driver that's not raced for quite a long time, so it's good to have him back. Jaromir Jurek, that raced in the GT3 European Championship for a time, but that's going back well over a decade. So it's good to have him back. The rust is falling off, and the times are getting quicker all the while. We are almost at the checkered flag for the end of Q1. So a 2:26.340 for Christoph Ulrich. Through goes Jaromir Jurek, up through Les Combes. Be able to improve on this lap? The evidence would suggest no, because he's down within the first sector. Heads towards Bruxelles. This is the car that Mara Casadei will take over for Q2. And I'm still a bit surprised that Stefan Rattel isn't further up the order, because that car normally has good pace. But anyway, we'll see whether it's going to be any better in the hands of Luca Piri in the second session. But what we're having is certainly an unusual looking grid, and that bodes well for the first race, I would have thought.
I regret to inform you as well, David, that number 88 has just had another lap time cancelled for track limits. So Stefan Rattel feeling the wrath here of the clerk of the course and the race stewards for exceeding track limits. So 9th place is as good as it looks as though it will get for the 88 car. We are seeing some improvements in the sectors though. Both Rosenberger 4th and Blakemole 5th put in PBs in the first sector. Rosenberger wasn't able to back that up with another personal best in the middle, but it wasn't a terrible middle sector, so he could still improve maybe. He's only 7/10 of a second behind Guarini, who has now made it stick in 3rd place, it would seem. Some teams opting to head for the pit lane a little early, just so they can get this driver change done as quickly as they can.
Although that's a soloist, that's Ulrich who's done, and he can not waste time effectively by being in the pits ready to go for Q2. And the team can do whatever is required. But he's been on the circuit pretty much all the way through. Very few made any sort of pit stop at all, did they? Aurelius Rustica being warned about track limits. Stefan Rattel's lap time taken away, you'd mentioned. So the rest to come, others bailing, including Chris Rosenberger and also Aurelius Rustica. There is Leonardo Guarini, who in the end, provisionally, 3rd. So he did manage to string something in there at the very end, but a really frustrating session that for him.
Yeah, because he had gone quick enough for 2nd place. I think his quicker laps were still quicker than Gaelic's managed there towards the end. So, but that is only the first part of qualifying. We've got another part coming up, and that will see, I'm sure, a shift in the dynamic as some of the pro drivers, the silver-graded drivers, jump into those 5 Pro-Am cars that we've got. There is Stefan Rattel. Is he going to complete this lap? It doesn't look as though he will. No, sticks to the right coming out of the chicane and heads for the pit lane. So Rattel will end in 9th place. Quite a spread there in lap times as well, which has been a bit of a feature of this series, and it actually generates some good racing in a bizarre sort of way.
Yeah, everyone finds someone to battle against.
Yeah, exactly.
They sort of find their next equivalent. And the other fascination has always been that as soon as you put co-drivers in, things change. Sometimes you get the same cars running at the same pace with either driver. You know, battle carries on before and after the stops, but you're never bored. There's always somebody to battle against. New set of Pirellis then for Bert Langin, who takes over 81, ready for the second session. But it's Christoph Ulrich then who is the fastest from Peter Gerlings, then Leonardo Guarini, the top 3 at the end of Q1. 2:26.340, then the best time. This is how we look. Christoph Ulrich is on pole, and he's on pole in the AMS from Peter Gerlings. Leonardo Guarini then is 3rd, ahead of Chris Rosenberger and Michael Blechermolen 5th. 6th, Jaromir Jirik from Sedi Sarmini, a bit further back than you might have anticipated actually there. 8th quickest, Aurelius Rustiger from Stefan Rattel, and Hubert Trunkenpolz rounds out the top 10. So those the times and the gaps at the end of Q1. Now, in most cases, time to do a driver change, make any quick adjustments, but 20 minutes does go very, very quickly around here. You don't get many laps in. Let's look at the best bits then of Q1. Green flag at the end of the pit lane. Everybody goes pouring out onto the circuit. And there is ready to go Sedi Sarmini in the background. It was Christoph Ulrich, though, who was straight on the money. First out, absolutely determined to buy clear track space. The only opposition really came from Peter Gerlings' Audi, and Leonardo Guarini spent a lot of his time exploring all of Belgium. When he harnessed the right lines, it was all good, but he had this big moment at Pouhon, for example, on the exit. He was regularly wide at turn 19, the chicane exit as well. And finally, he was able to do one lap that was to the satisfaction of the race officials, and he put him 3rd on the grid. But Christoph Ulrich absolutely charged through the 20 minutes, and he's going to do it all over again. As a solo driver, he will do both segments of qualifying. Michael Blechermolen, 5th fastest at the end of Q1. That'll be a quick car to the second session with Peter Cox at the wheel of it. And there, Peter Gerlings, who is the man that takes 2nd for race 1. Christoph Ulrich, though, pole position for the KTM, and he's looking in very impressive form as we get ready for Q2. So, still hot, very humid, bit sunny in places, bit cloudy, getting a bit grey again once more, so find a weather app you like, go with it, because it could be anything in the next 20 minutes, could be anything by the end of the day. There's still a lot to come at Spa with single-seater GT qualifying and racing for both before the end of the day, so the activity on track is due to finish at 9:30 this evening. So for the teams, for everybody involved, it's a long day, and the weather could have yet more to say before the final checkered flag falls. So take the same cars. In most cases now you put a different driver in. Let's see how this next grid pans out, and whether or not Christoph Ulrich can go even quicker, because if it does cloud over a bit, it might be a bit cooler. That might just help as we get set for Q2.
Yeah, and you'd have to say that does give him a small advantage over certainly the other AM drivers, because he's had 20 minutes on track. He knows the conditions, he knows the grip levels. You know, they might be able to make a few tweaks to the car as well between sessions based on his feedback after that first quali session. So, yeah, this should play into his hands, you'd have thought. 3 times a winner this year, never off the podium within the AM category, Christoph Ulrich, and that's why he is on the verge now of this championship victory. He could actually wrap it up in the first race of the 2 this weekend if things go to plan. The 81 car there, the PK Car Sports car of Bert Langin, as it will be now for this next session. And there are some pretty handy drivers, aren't there? Particularly some of these silver-graded drivers, many of whom in a past life were pro drivers, and now simply because of their ages have been moved into the silver category, but they have not lost any of their speed or their tenacity on track, and they bring a wealth of experience, these drivers, don't they, that the AMs that they're teamed up with can really feed off.
Yeah, Michael Vergers, Stefan Rossina, for example, Peter Cox, Hans Stuck, another ex-Grand Prix racer, double Le Mans winner, Bert Longchamp. Yes, I mean, they're all very accomplished. You're right, they've got a bit older, but they are still competitive, and you put them all together, and you get some good fighting. So it's going to be an interesting session, this, especially as we are predicting it's going to be faster. So whether Christoph Ulrich can, first of all, better his own time, and indeed be better than many others, because you've got more experienced drivers now. It's going to be interesting. They're ready to go at the end of the pit lane. Mara Casadei in the Lamborghini. That is the KTM ready to go for Christoph Ulrich, the SRO Motorsports car, the Swiss team, and the Audi number 88 of LP Racing now with Luca Piri taking over from Stefan Rattal. So that car ready to go. Look behind it, you've got Leonardo Guarini, who would have had a word with himself, I'm sure. And he can do it all over again. So we know that car's quick, just proved it. So Guarini, now let's see where he fits in relative to the pros in the Pro-Am car class. He's good to go, door open. The 911 GT2 Porsche. Mara Casadei fires up the Lamborghini. That car will make its way down the pit lane. The Target racing car. Target, one of the regular Lamborghini Super Trofeo teams over the years, very experienced in running these sorts of cars. So 20 minutes it will be, and they'll hit the track very shortly indeed. The race director, Peter Daly, will give the call to the teams to tell them when they can get out onto the circuit, and everybody eager to get on with the job in hand then.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if they are concerned about this weather moving in. They'll not really want to hang around here. They want to get those laps in, because of course if it rains that will slow the circuit down. So there shouldn't be a reason for a huge delay here. I think within the next couple of minutes we'll get the cars out onto the circuit. The number 5 car then, that's the Speed Factory racing car. Michael Vergers, as we've said, will jump in now for this second session, and the driver that qualifies in session 1, for example, will be the start driver for race 1, and then the driver that qualifies in session 2 will start race 2. So a very similar format to that we see in the British GT double headers, for example. And it is individual grids then from each session, so we essentially have a grid from that first race already, and the second one set by this. There you can see it. It's not that grey and murky from that angle, is it? But this is the trouble with Spa. You never do know what's just the other side of that hill.
Yeah, by Spa standards, that's a good day.
Yes.
But it might change in a twinkling. And with the lights flashing, Mara Casadei good to go. The lap that we're talking about in terms of the sectors, the first sector takes you from the start line round La Source, just before Les Combes, the middle sector from there to just before the Cours Paul Frère, and then to the end of the lap for sector 3. And that is the front bodywork that we've been discussing, so up and forward to allow you access to the cab of the KTM. It's Peter Cox sitting aboard number 23 now, the former single-seater driver turned GT and touring car star, who has barely missed a season since he started racing in the mid-80s. But Peter Cox, with masses of experience, he was in the wars a little bit at Hockenheim, both in terms of a bit of contact and visiting the stewards. Didn't race at Monza because they, having nominated who would do which session, they then swapped and put the wrong driver in. So they were penalised, put to the back of the grid, and the car was withdrawn. Then at Misano, the car was in strife in the first race as well, with another different co-driver with Peter. However, it is a competitive car, so is the white one of Hans Stuck that you saw a moment ago, with his familiar helmet, and that's Christoph Ulrich looking ready to go in the Sportec car, staying on board. We know that that's quick, but he just proved it. A 2:26.3, the best time of that session. Green flag waved at the end of the pit lane, so we are in business, and very shortly, field will make its way out on track. And strangely, nobody seems in a tearing hurry.
That is a surprise, actually. Clearly they're not worried about the weather, and they just maybe no one wants to be the first out there because the track is still evolving, and so the later times in this session might be the quickest. There though goes the 88 car then. Stefan Rattal is out of it, Luca Piri is in, and they will be their 4th in the championship, still looking for their first win, although they've been 2nd 3 times. So you're right, they've been on the pace all the season, not yet been on the top step of the podium within the Pro-Am category, but perhaps that could change this weekend. A lot of that pressure though now does rather fall on the shoulders of Piri after Stefan Rattal could manage only 9th fastest earlier on.
So away most of them go. There is then Christoph Ulrich, who awaits the signal. Ideally, let him out in completely clear track space. Team hold and hold and hold. Mara Casadei on track, Michael Vergers on track, Luca Piri, Leonardo Guarini Klaus Angerhofer. So the pit lane is emptying. Christoph Ulrich set to go. And there, more of the KTMs.
Yeah, so interesting. Ulrich was one of the first out in the first session, now one of the last out. There must be a reason for this. Perhaps so that he doesn't get in the way of some of the quicker pro drivers. I don't really know. He's letting all of the AM cars go out too. So there's no. This is clearly planned. This is clearly the strategy they came up with. Now the car fires up, and I think he's about to head out. So he's not the only one. In fairness, there are one or two of them that haven't yet made it out onto the circuit. But there he goes, very leisurely. Pulls out of his pit stall and makes his way out onto the track. So,
no urgency at all, is there, Phil? No. You're right. So he's good to go there. Even later away is Peter Cox. But on the sticker tyres, great feeling for a driver. Peter makes his way down the pit road, and Michael Vergers is on the money straight away then. So the Speed Factory Porsche just getting ahead of the target Lamborghini, that of Mara Casadei, and 17 3/4 minutes. Soon ticks by, doesn't it, by the time they've released them, and you've got the outlap done.
Well, it's a long lap, isn't it? You know, over 2 minutes, and from the pit lane especially, it can take you even longer to get around. So you have to factor that in, and that is another reason why I'm a little surprised to see one or two of them not in any great rush to get out there. Of course, they'll know that, you know, once they've got 4 or 5 laps under their belt, the tyres may be past their best. So in a way, there's no need to go out there early, but you always run the risk of a late red flag, cutting the session short, and you know, you could catch up to the traffic, especially someone like Peter Cox. You would expect him to be quicker than the others ahead of him on the track, and so if he catches them, that's not going to help his lap times. Do you know, I don't think I've been at a race meeting that Peter Cox is racing at for over 20 years when he was racing in the British Touring Car Championship for Honda. That is terrifying, really, to think it was that long ago, but great to see him still around and still as competitive as ever.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's been a mainstay of Lamborghini Super Trofeo for many of the early years of the Block Pan Endurance Series, for ADAC GT as well, and his daughter now races as well. So yes, Peter, a little greyer, but massively experienced and a good guy to have on board, because he's helping develop the car and develop some of the less experienced drivers that come on board and have driven the cars this year. Not necessarily Michael Blick among them, but you know, some that have done limited amounts of racing, able to benefit from his guidance. Bert Langevin is going to be the man that sets the target time. He's just going out of Les Combes up towards Bruxelles. This is Michael Vergers then in the Porsche, stands on the brakes, the nose crashes back down to the ground as he goes right and then left up through the switch back at Les Combes, and now down once more through the left on towards Bruxelles.
Ooh, that was very close to the gravel trap, wasn't it? That was pretty much perfectly judged, the amount of road he used on the exit there.
Yeah, Michael's not going to leave much on the table, I wouldn't have thought here. So he has done a good first sector, and Bert Langevin fractionally quicker still, but yeah, Michael Vergers is still hustling on. So Bert Langevin did the original Sector 1 best, Michael Vergers faster. The other guys that are going to be worth keeping an eye to are Leonardo Guarini, certainly, and possibly Peter Cox. Just depends how much grunt that KTM has got in a straight line. Well, we know that from Ulrich's efforts, it is good through the corners, certainly, it's nice and nimble, but is Peter Cox going to be able to match the pace of the, what you might call rather more conventional shaped GT cars?
Yeah, the KTM is supposed to be quite a drivable car. They're all supposed to be quite drivable. The KTM, I think, is the easiest is the wrong word, but maybe the most compliant of the cars.
It's interesting you say that, because the evidence of the year does not back that up at all. It's really flighty. You know, if anything has been spinning or been in the wars, it's been a KTM, because they're so light, and quite often it's the AM that gets caught out by applying the throttle, and it just dances away from you. So maybe they are, maybe they, but there's an art to driving them, I don't know. But yes, we've had quite a few of them facing the wrong way or being off the road. Equally, the Porsche is not meant to be the best friendly car, because that's got slightly inbuilt understeer, so people tell you. They're working on that all the while and making it more competitive. But you know, new category, new cars, they're being developed all the time, and everyone's got to get a handle on it. Vergers sets the target time then, 2:26.585, and that's fractionally slower than Ulrich did towards the end of Q1.
Yes, but I think Vergers will get a little bit quicker, won't he? Now we've still got 14.25 minutes left of the session. Langevin goes second, then Casadei third. He's the highest placed AM driver out there at the moment. Now he gets knocked to fourth by Luca Piri in that number 88 Audi. Porsche hops and bounces his way up through Radion there. I've noticed on the previous lap, as soon as it went anywhere near a curb, the nose started bouncing up and down, quite softly sprung, that Porsche, with of course very little weight over the front of the car to start with. So you can see the way it dips there as he hits the brakes into Lake Arm. I like a car that moves around and that pivots and that bounces up and down. It really does look spectacular from the outside.
Stefan Rossina is about to go to the top or near the top. Vergas has done this gun time ahead of Longchamp, but Rossina beats both on a 2:26.545, so good effort that by Stefan Rossina. Sorry, 2:25.545 I should say. So Rossina goes from the top, heads down to the run to Radion, but Stefan Rossina then 1 second clear of Michael Verger's bet. Longchamp third, and Hans Stuck has just gone fourth. So what, Stucky now 74, and he is still totally irrepressible. Leonardo Guarini is fifth. Klaus Angerhofer was sixth, but that's all changed because Christoph Ulrich has now gone second, and he has done a 2:25.770, so he's going quicker than he did in the first session.
Which I thought he would, because he's learnt from that first session. He's gone out there now with a fresh perspective and a new plan of attack, and the track itself, as I've said, may well be getting a little bit quicker too. So Stefan Rossina then, fastest in the session at 2:25.545, but going quicker again now in sector 1 at 40.5. That's nearly a full second quicker than Christoph Ulrich's first sector from the previous lap. So Rossina is on an absolute mission here, half a second nearly quicker than he went on the previous lap too. So tyres now into the ideal operating temperature and pressure, and Rossina charging on down into Pouhon then. This double apex left-hander, don't run wide through the first part, don't run wide through the second part, but Rossina squeaky clean through there. This looks like being an even quicker lap, David. Yeah, purple first and second sector. However, Vergas now is going quicker again in the first sector by a couple of tenths than Rossina. So the number 5 car then of Michael Vergas in the middle sector somewhere at the moment, and looks as though it might be about to challenge for the fastest time of the session. They're fourth at the moment, that number 5 car, but going pretty rapidly in sector 1, and that car looks pretty good in the speed trap as well. 274 kilometers an hour in the speed trap halfway up the Kemmel Straight, compared to sort of high 260s for those KTMs. So it's not as quick in a straight line as the Porsche, which understeers its way through Pouhon. You weren't lying about that, were you?
Michael Vergas gets away with that and is with an absolute best in the first sector. Peter Cox has just gone second, 2:24.909. So the margin is 0.253 of a second between the two front row KTMs. But a whole different feel to this session, isn't it? Same cars, but different drivers, different pace. Everything changes. One of the fascinations of double driver races. Vergas then absolute best and a personal best. Yes, the understeer at Pouhon oh so nearly caught him out, but he got away with it. Mauro Casadei a bit disappointing at the moment. He's the slowest of the 10, surprisingly, given how well he went at Misano, returning after an absence of a good few seasons. Mauro Casadei. Michael Vergas then, with half the session still to go, up towards the chicane. What does he need to find to get this onto the front row? He's got to find the best part of 2 seconds, which ain't going to be easy. He has thrown everything at it, and an absolute best in the first sector illustrates the commitment. He had his moment at Pouhon. The car slithers its way out of the chicane, breaks the beam to go third. All right, so it's an improvement, but he's still got to find another second. He's halved that, in fact.
he's losing all that time in the middle sector, isn't he? Which makes sense because the car doesn't seem to want to go around the corners. So they do need to work on that. They're better maybe now than they were at the start of the season, but still progress to be made. Peter Cox, by the way, has jumped into second place a moment or two ago, so he's now a quarter of a second slower than Racina on provisional pole. There is Peter. We catch a glimpse of him through the foliage down there at Speaker's Corner as he heads towards Pouhon. So he was late into the session. He's put in a couple of quick laps, and now it looks like he's coasting again. So perhaps pit lane bound once more.
And Maro Casadai's had a lap time taken away from him. He was the slowest anyway, but he's even slowest because he's been exceeding track limits at turn 19. But yeah, Peter Cox has backed right out of this. Whether he pits or whether he's going to go again, just give the tyres a breather and have one more go. We didn't really see people doing a run, pitting, doing a run, but they might have stayed out there. Bert Langin has gone out, but it was an early stop, making me think there was something that needed doing to the car rather than just a new set of boots. So Langin only 5th, one to watch, but Peter Cox definitely is not on a quick lap. No argument about that.
No, the 88 is though coming down into the left-hander then. Luca Piri, personal best in the first sector of 41.8, which is okay, but nothing that spectacular, not likely to improve on his current grid position at that sort of pace. 1.3 seconds you can see slower than Racina, who has pitted. Stuck has pitted as well, so we are seeing more and more pit lane visits. This time the Audi wobbling away there as it went into fifth path on a slightly odd line as well, you must say. So Luca is trying to get everything out of this, isn't he?
He hung on to it, but it was all compromised, wasn't it, all the way into the pith path, and it's be interesting to see whether this sector's an improvement. But that does not look a stable car at the moment. Either it's having to be worked really hard, or there's something inherently wrong with it. But it's down in the middle sector, so Luca Piri losing a big chunk of time in the middle. Told you about Maro Casadai's lap time disappearing. Rosina has pitted now, having gone onto pole position in the Sedi Samini shared car. There is, and the lap for Luca Piri is completely unravelled because of traffic. He got past Casadai and then found a face full of Aurelius Rustica. So whatever he was doing, it wasn't that quick anyway, but now the lap has gone for Piri and wipers on for Rustica. So does that suggest that there are spots of rain elsewhere? It's not actually come to anything at the start line yet.
No, but that may be different up at the top of Lake On, mightn't it? So we'll see you next time the cars get up there, whether we can spy a little bit of moisture in the air to add to the frustration there. Vergas was not actually heading for the pit lane, he was just backing off, wasn't he? So getting in the way and not even on an in lap. Here comes Guarini then, comes across the line, only 8th this time. So Guarini in the previous session, when he kept it within the white lines, was pretty competitive. This time though, 2:28.8. I think he did go a bit quicker than that, if memory serves, in the previous session.
Yeah, I think you're right, but for the moment, Guarini needing to harness everything. So let's see what he can do. It took him a while to get the perfect lap together, didn't it, even in that earlier session, because he kept having his moments of exceeding track limits. He got it hooked up in the end, uses lots of curb there, but he's in danger of encountering all of this traffic, look, because now Luca Piri has backed off, so it's Aurelius Rustica that's got to find a way past him. There's still Maro Casadai up the road, and there, Guarini closing in on them, and he's going to encounter Piri just about at the exit of Les Combes, and that's going to cost him time.
Yes, looks like it will. He's only 2/10 off in the first sector. That's a good first sector. The Porsche is working well. I suppose it comes off La Source well, being rear engine, gets good traction out of the tight corners, but then, through Radion and up the Kemmel Straight, keeping that pace. It's this middle sector where it just hasn't looked happy at all. This can sometimes be a problem with Porsches because it doesn't have that weight over the front axle, but I must say this GT2 version in particular seems to be struggling. That was neat though, through the left-hander, drops down the hill now to Pouhon. Let's watch with interest how it is through here though. This is where this car was certainly looking a little wayward earlier on, pitches into the left-hander, that looks neat and tidy. It sticks this time, sort of, runs a bit wide over the curb, and you see you run maybe a foot wide there, you have to lift off the throttle, and then it's uphill again out to the second half of Pouhon towards pit path, and it just kills your momentum.
I think this looks a shade more stable though than the Speed Factory car, which is interesting because LP are running it for the first time, whereas Speed Factory have been here all season. Now, it looks more stable because it's not as quick, granted, but Guarini, there it sort of needed an extra bite, didn't it, to get it turned into Campus. No argument that he's working the car hard, but again, it's just a little out wide over the curb, not totally compliant. So the KTMs do seem to be the better cars right now. Lighter, more stable, more sorted. Bert Langin, however, improved last time, but he's still 5th, 2:25.7. He's done a personal best in the middle sector of this lap, and the flag is 4 minutes away. So Guarini up towards the chicane now. down in the middle, quite a margin down in the middle, so perhaps this is not going to be one of his sparkling laps. Going to try again. Fights the car out of the chicane. Mauro Casadei goes through ahead and completes his lap, and there's nothing exciting about the Lamborghini's lap time. Curious, actually, that Mauro is no quicker. But the KTM looks like it's the car to have around Spa, doesn't it? They're still 1, 2 and 5, with Christoph Ulrich having gone fractionally quicker than he did in Q1. Bert Longchamp up to third, now on a 2:25.618.
Yes, time for 2 more laps as well, if he's got life in the tyres then. Here's this iconic shot on the inside of Eau Rouge then. Over the curb, the car flashes past, bottoms out, look, as it goes up the hill. That was really spectacular, and it tells me that Bert Longchamp is really pushing on here, putting all of those forces through the suspension, through the tyres, as he tries to carry the momentum up the hill. What's this first sector going to be then for Bert Longchamp?
Who has just lost his last lap for track limits at the exit of the chicane. So he was third, but he's not going to be third for much longer.
Right, and doesn't improve in the first sector this time, although it was a personal best speed through the speed trap that time. Yet dropped back down to 5th place again now, so Vergers and Ulrich jump back up as well. Ulrich has actually just headed for the pit lane, but decent effort this. We didn't expect him necessarily to be the fastest in the session, but he's 4th and only a second slower than Racina. That's good stuff.
It is, isn't it? He's also looking a lot greyer again ahead, so I don't think it's going to be a factor in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, but it might be for subsequent activity on track. These cars come out for both races tomorrow, so this is the end of their day, and it might well be a relief that for some, partly for high-class racing, because they don't miss a race as they're still trying to repair the damaged Audi of earlier, but also the teams aren't going to be affected by any wet running at all, because there Christoph Ulrich, I think, was done, so he is on the class pole position, ready to jump out of the car. Yep, job done. Excellent effort that by Christoph Ulrich. 2 class pole positions, 1 outright pole, so it's all smiles as he walks away. And Christoph Ulrich, a great job for Sportec. KTM's run across different teams, that's right, the squad being one, but Sportec doing a very, very good job here. He in the race will have success pit stop penalties to overcome. There's a front runner at Misano, but even so, Christoph Ulrich don't discount.
Well, I mean, he's got 1.8 seconds over Stuck, hasn't he, in this session? So you'd imagine, as long as he has a clean start in both of those races, he should be able to overcome any subsequent success penalty. So, yeah, he's going to be tough to beat, that's for sure. More cars across the start-finish line here. Still no improvement for Guarini, who at least I haven't seen having any lap times disallowed this time, so he's learned from that. Then he goes for a big, bold move up the inside of Casadei in the Lamborghini at La Source, and subsequently scuppers the start of both of their laps, and this will be their final lap of the session now, 1.25 minutes to go. So I'm not particularly expecting this to be a brilliant start to the lap for Guarini, who is 8th overall, but still the 3rd highest placed AM class car. And just like that, David, fewer and fewer improvements. It does seem that certainly the pro drivers really got the best out of their cars and tyres in the first 10 minutes, and then we've seen the odd green sector after that, but no big improvements.
No, there's nothing really coming now, is there, late in the session, even if people need to improve. Like here, Mauro Casadei, there's just nothing left in the tank or left in the tyres. So it's curious that the best was taken out of them so early. Well, 1 or 2 that have been able to plug away. And having said all of that, Luca Piri has just done a personal best. But Mauro Casadei, as an example, is struggling, isn't he, in the Target Racing Lamborghini?
Yeah, we haven't seen a huge amount of the Lamborghinis. Let's see what we can tell through this middle sector, see if it is a handling issue or whether maybe just Casadei isn't getting the most out of it. Casadei, of course, is an AM driver, so we expect him not to be right at the front, but he's some 1.2 seconds slower than the next quickest car, which is Klaus Angerhofer in 9th place. So through Pouhon, the car looks okay, to be fair, isn't it?
And Mauro's experience, all right, he's not raced that much of late, but yeah, he's not a complete rookie, far from it. So there in the pit lane is the KTM in the background of Peter Cox with the bodywork going back down. Job done. Flag is out. So the only person really to focus on other than Luca Piri, Klaus Angerhofer in another of the KTMs. We're almost there at the end of the session. It's Hans Stuck's car in the foreground. And you're thinking, where's that BMW come from? Well, that's for a subsequent session. That's a British GT. It's a GT4 spec car. Trying to get in on the act, but hopefully it won't be long before BMW does build a GT2 spec car for customers. There is Luca Piri. So personal best sector 1, but then down in sector 2.
Yeah, that's the one where you really need the tyres to be working, isn't it, with all of those corners coming at you pretty quickly. So what was the Second sector time, yeah, it is a little way off the time that he needs, but we'll see. We'll get the laps completed anyway. 108.9 for Piri in the middle sector. The quickest has been sort of in 107s, I think, the low 107s at that. Is he going to bail from the lap? Yes, he is. So the 88 heads for the pit lane. And that, I think, might be a lot. We've still got Angerhofer, who did go personal best in the first sector. Second sector, he does not, though. And so, well, let's see. Is he going to be able to find that last little bit of time he needs? He needs 0.8 of a second, though. He doesn't need to pip Guarini.
That's disappointing. Longchamp only 5th. But you can imagine now, cries a balance of performance against the KTMs, can't you? Because 2 poles for a KTM. And I'm sure that when we get to the race, when you factor in anything that a race can throw, plus different driver speeds across different cars, it's going to be a different story altogether. But very interesting to see the way the KTMs have been so strong today. You've got here Klaus Angerhofer for the line, and then after him it will be Michael Vergers in the Porsche. So Angerhofer goes by and doesn't improve on that last lap. In fact, he dropped about half a second. More lap times being cancelled. One of them is Bert Longchamp, another one is Mauro Casadei. So it seems as though when you offend, you're a serial offender, isn't it? Stefan Rattel out of the car after Q1, talking to Luca Piri, the LP Racing duo there. And the car in sort of Fanatec SRO colours anyway, corporate colours. And there is the Audi, which will start second race, 7th on the grid. This is how Q2 looks. Stefan Rossina, 0.253 of a second up on Peter Cox. Michael Vergers, third from Christophe Ulrich. Longchamp, 5th ahead of Hans Stuck. Then Luca Piri from Leonardo Guarini, who flattered to deceive a bit in that. Klaus Angerhofer 9th and Mauro Casadei rounding out the top 10. So Bert Longchamp will be one to watch, and so too Christophe Ulrich, because we know he's quick, and of course he is a soloist, and we know that that car is competitive. So 2 races tomorrow for the Fanatec GT2 European Series. The first is at 9:40 local time, and that's the one that will start with Christophe Ulrich on pole position. A fascinating fight there should be in the opening race for this series tomorrow. But for now, Stefan Rossina and Christophe Ulrich split the pole positions between them, and we'll see what race day brings, whether or not it's going to be a KTM benefit tomorrow here at Spa, and indeed what the weather has in store for us tomorrow. KTM's rather dominated qualifying day at Spa-Francorchamps. Let's see what racing is going to bring. First race, as I say, 9:40 local time tomorrow. Join us for that if you can. But for now, from Andy McEwen and David Addison, it's goodbye from Spa.